Board button, Shabika. There we go. Hi, everybody. I think the few of you that joined early know that two of the Broadband Breakthrough team are on vacation. Bill is missing the rotten Minnesota weather, and he's down south on a cruise, a music cruise. I can't wait to hear all about it. And Robbie is out rock climbing. I don't know what kind of weather he's facing there, but he is also gone. So you have the all-female team today on presenting, and we're going to talk today about communicating to achieve your community broadband vision. And really this session is about how you organize your team around common goals, strategies, and messages. And so we started that last week when we talked about your vision statement, and we're going to continue on because you're going to start reaching out to your community. If you haven't already done that, you're going to start making presentations toward the end of the session when you have your action plan. And we just want to make sure you're equipped with all of the tools that are in your toolbox. Today, I'm going to be joined by the absolutely vivacious and enthusiastic Deanna Thomas, who's Media Relations Manager at Illinois Soy. I love working with Deanna. She is infectious. And her relationships with Ag Press and her 43,000 farmer members is a real asset to this program. So she'll talk, and then I have the great pleasure of telling you that Baily Conradi, who's manager of the Champaign County Farm Bureau, will speak at the end of our session specifically about what she is doing, what the Champaign County Farm Bureau is doing to move their fiber broadband project along in their county. And you may remember that Bill Bodine specifically talked in his presentation about managing farmer relationships, particularly around rights of way and easements. And so I think it's really important for us to hear how the involvement of a county farm bureau is helping in that process. So Baily will talk about that, and that a great deal is about communications. So Grace, maybe you could put up the slides. And before I start, I did want to give Hancock County a short couple of minutes to call out that they have some good news to share with the group. Who would like to do that?
I'll check first. Is Gray or is Jay on there?
I haven't seen him join yet.
Yeah, Hancock County got some good news. McDonough Telephone Cooperative got a grant for, I believe, $18 million. 12 million of that will come to Hancock County, which is great news. And that's through the USDA Reconnect program. I don't know a lot. They are having a press conference being held tomorrow in Galesburg with the USDA Secretary Torres Small attending, along with State Congressman Eric Sorensen from the 17th District. And then the USDA Rural Development State Director Betsy Dirksen will also be there. So yeah, some great news for Hancock County and MTC.
It is just fantastic. You know, as I said, I'd love to claim responsibility for this, but this is one of those announcements that can really, I think, motivate everybody else on this call that getting federal funding and working with your local broadband provider really can pay off. And I know that McDonough is also building in some surrounding counties, though unfortunately not in Schuyler. But around and about. And so we'll learn more about the press. We'll learn more after the press release, and we'll be putting it in the Illinois Broadband Connections newsletter, which if you all have not signed up for that, perhaps Shubika can put the link into the chat, and we will be able to have more signups. Okay. Okay, can everybody put themselves on mute? That would be great, except the talkers, of course. I think, there we go. Thanks so much. Okay, next slide, Grace. There we go. So what I wanted to talk about is that you should have front and center a series of questions as you're undertaking this process. That vision statement that we asked you to do, start thinking about last week, really answers the question of what does your community look like when you are successful? And so we started, at least in the McLean team, to come up with some phrases and words, and then our Farm Bureau rep, Anna, actually put together a draft statement, which I know the group is noodling on, but it really is about how do you want your future to look if you are successful. Your team, you want to ask the question of who are your passionate community champions that are going to propel this vision? And what's working in your favor and what challenges do you need? So looking at your community climate is really important as you undergo this process. So you can take those factors that do work in your favor, whether it's, of course, the pandemic was a great motivator for communities to get their act together on broadband. But there are challenges often where people are afraid of the cost or afraid of being left out yet again of another build, skeptical about government involvement in broadband. There's just a whole series of challenges that can come up along the way. But in order to build to your vision and not feel intimidated, it's important to set some smaller milestones, some smaller outcomes that you would need to build toward your vision. And you can then talk about your vision in terms of what are these things that you're accomplishing along the way that you can then say, hey, you know, we've done this and we're now moving on to our next milestone and we need your help. So these are the questions that I think are important for you to assess. Next slide, Grace. So again, for each milestone that you set, so each of these smaller outcomes, you would want to ask yourselves these questions. Who are decision makers who can help you reach this milestone? So you all are in the survey process right now. One of the important things is you're identifying people who can help you be successful, get more surveys done. And so that might be your school district and school IT or superintendent. It could be your Farm Bureau or soy association members. It can be your healthcare facility. These are the people that can help you reach getting a bunch of surveys, which is what we're hoping you all do to give you the data to make a good decision. So these are the questions that you want to ask. I think one of the most important things is figuring out, who do your decision makers listen to? You know, are there influencers that help? We have a wonderful story that Bill tells about a county board member up in Minnesota who was really against doing a broadband project. And so the broadband team went out and surveyed a whole bunch of people in his district who told you know, their lousy broadband stories and the impact that this was having on him. And it sort of turned him into a broadband champion. So I think it was recognizing that that groundswell from people in his district, you know, hearing from them really changed his mind about how active he was going to be in the project. So you want to ask, you know, who is it easiest for you to reach out to, or who could become an advocate for you? Next. A lot of people love to jump right to this. And I always caution people not to think about your tactics first, but to answer those questions that we talked about earlier. These tactics, whether it's advertising, op-eds, meetings, social media, door knocking. So, you know, reaching those people who don't have broadband to take your survey. We have a wonderful story of Flanagan, Illinois, a community of 1,000 people where broadband was so bad that they could not distribute the survey via online methods. And they went on a door knocking campaign and had 500 people fill out the survey. So this was a very powerful tactic for them. They had flyers. They also sent flyers in their electric bills to notify people that there were going to be people knocking on doors. So those were two great tactics to get the survey response up. Obviously, calling or texting, community forums play such an important part. I think you're going to hear about that from Baily later in our session. And then, of course, you know, we ask people to tell their broadband story early on. And I always say it's nothing like lousy broadband to bring people together. And so that kind of storytelling is very powerful. Those testimonials about personal impact, whether it's my house is not as valued because I don't have broadband, or I couldn't get a sick relative better because I couldn't access telehealth. Those are the kinds of things that really move people, not just the statistics, but the stories. Next slide. So we're going to quickly just talk about these 4 components, and Benton's going to use one example. It's a publication that I have talked about in this session before, but I'm going to break it down a little bit for you. And maybe I need to start just by talking a little bit about what Benton does when we're not doing these community engagement programs. So the bulk of what we do is to try to educate policymakers and influence them. I can't use the lobbying word, but we want to try to get them to enact federal policies that make it easier for you all to put broadband in the ground in your communities. So we do a lot of research, we communicate, we pick best practices to try to, again, show why certain things, certain characteristics about broadband or certain areas need broadband. These are the kinds of things that we do at both the federal and state level. So we try to describe these 4 things: need or opportunity. We try to describe what it is that we're trying to accomplish, how we're going to do it, and of course, primary is the vision for what we want to accomplish. Next slide. So I have, as I said, talked about this publication that we did at the end of 2021 for the United Soybean Board, which is called The Future of American Farming: Broadband Solutions for the Farm Office, the Field, and the Community. And our vision for this paper is, I'll just quickly read it. Broadband is a necessary tool to innovate farming practices, allowing for more targeted and efficient resource use. Farmers need connectivity in the farmhouse and farm office, in the field, and in the community to enable sustainable data-driven agriculture. These are 2 sectors that are incredibly intertwined in rural communities: the community itself and the farmers who are working and supporting and driving, in many cases, the economy in these counties. And we took the position that farmers know what they need for sustainable data-driven agriculture, and we built off of a report that USB had done that gave some really startling statistics about how bad broadband was for 60% of farmers in the United States. Next slide. So we had a team of people that helped us do this. So that's one of the things we ask you to do. Your team is here in formation, and we always want you to add members and build and find associates. But our team members were, in addition to ourselves, the United Soybean Board. At the time, their treasurer, Megan Kaiser, was their spokesperson for us. She's now the board chair of United Soybean Board. And she was just a fantastic spokesperson, a farmer out of Missouri. And the Center for Rural Strategies, who we'll be working with on this project, helped us with what Deanna's doing for us in Illinois. So they were our boots on the ground to get to rural press around the country and to help us work with social media and other things in ag sectors where Benton is not primarily communicating our message. And as I said, we had agricultural leaders, broadband practitioners, policy experts, federal, state, and local government officials were our primary audience. And this climate that we described these two stats, which I've mentioned to you before, were the things that came out of the survey work that United Soybean Board had done, which is that 60% of US farmers and ranchers did not believe they had adequate internet connectivity to run their business. And sometimes more importantly, 70% of them did not have another viable option to change service if they were unhappy with their broadband providers, which tells you that in many cases in rural areas, you are operating under a monopoly system, meaning one broadband provider, if you're lucky, sometimes two. I'm not saying it's much better in urban areas. In my apartment building, it's only two choices, AT&T or Comcast. And I know many of you suffer from lack of choice. Okay, next slide. So our messaging, really, we tried to pick out 16 recommendations that we thought farmers and rural communities would need. These are policy recommendations that we have seen enacted through the IIJA and through some changes that the USDA Reconnect program has implemented since our report came out. And this really, part of this was trying to raise what we call future-proof performance standards. So USDA used to have a 10-1 guys, speed standard for its grants, sort of crept up to 25.3, and now these networks must be capable of 100 over 20 or 100 over 100. They must be what we call scalable up to 100 over 100 megabit per second service. We wanted to spend a lot of time talking about how upload speed is really important for farmers. You're putting data into the cloud to make real-time decisions about inputs and outputs, fertilizer use, pesticide use, etc. And so unless you have good upload, and most of us don't, most cable providers have emphasized download speeds because that's a kind of passive, you know, like I'm downloading a movie and I want to watch it. But with the pandemic, again, we saw that this kind of use of Zooming, for instance, requires much more upload speed. And when you have kids who are doing their homework and adults who are working from home, that upload speed becomes increasingly important. We talked about deep fiber build out and that rural America should not be squeezed anymore with lousy broadband. And we talked about broadband maps being really inadequate for the kind of coverage that they need, and that the mapping in these rural counties is generally pretty bad, particularly on farmland. And we wanted mobile coverage to be included in terms of, because that's what farmers are using in the field for the most part. And so that has been left out of mapping. And then the other important thing was that affordability and digital equity are just as important. And when we say digital equity, we mean programs in rural communities that help people make full use of their broadband connections. So everything from teaching you how to use email or safely navigate the internet, not be subject to spams or bots or, you know, goodness, this chat GBT AI, you know, this is going to pose a lot of challenges, but digital equity or digital opportunity programs locally really help with the kind of training and strategies to get people onto affordable broadband. So those were just 5 of our 16 messages that we wanted to impart. Next slide. And our milestones were, just mostly internal. We had a research and literature review phase. We did a lot of one-on-one interviews with farmers all over the country, and we used USB and some of our USDA connections to talk to a rancher in Minnesota, a soy and core farmer in Illinois, and an incredible group of farmers in Indiana. So we got around to ask them, and we identified some best practice demonstration projects so that people knew that it was possible to have better broadband and do better things with it. So we had all through our report some examples of how communities had tackled their broadband challenges, just to give people some hope that there were good things happening out there. We wrote and published our report, and then we created an expert pool of people who could do communications and education for us. We're not the only ones out there talking about our report. We had people involved in early convenings. We asked them to review the report, and we asked them to do social media for us and to speak on panels at conferences to carry these 16 recommendations out widely. And really, in the end, promoting the purpose and implementation of agricultural broadband in rural America. Again, one of our primary goals. Next slide. These are our tactics. I will not go through these. These slides will come to you, but just to pick out a couple of things, we did set up meetings with administrative and congressional staff, agency staff, at the Federal Communications and the United States Department of Agriculture to educate them. And we did work with United Soybean Board to reach ag media. So again, the kinds of things that Deanna is doing for us, United Soy was very, very good at helping us with. Next slide. So I want to now talk about some examples of things that have been done in Illinois that you all might think about to enact a good communication strategy. And I'm going to pull some examples from an earlier program that we conducted in Illinois called Illinois Connected Communities. You can see that Mercer County and Flanagan, who I spoke of, that village of 1,000 people, named their internet initiative. So had a name for their team. I think it's really good. Obviously, there's a lot of connect this place or connect this county. Mercer County did a little bit more, Mercer County Internet Initiative, and they did some flyers that you can see on this screen, and they held community meetings. So Mary Gay, who is one of our community liaisons, was part of the Leadership Council for Southwest Illinois and was very important in setting up broadband summits for community groups, providers, and elected officials. And I know Bill is encouraging many of you that week that he's visiting to set up potentially some meetings with community to try to talk about your efforts. The SWIL team did 60 plus community presentations in a 9-county region. So this was our biggest single participant in any of the programs we've done. It was a huge team of 45 people representing these 9 counties. They had subgroups for adoption, access, they had an education subgroup. And so all of these members of these groups got out there with their constituents, school districts, townships, et cetera, to make presentations of their broadband action plans, about the surveys and other things. And then sometimes people integrate their broadband effort into an overall economic development plan. The city of Harvey, which is primarily an African-American community on the south side of Chicago, had a broader theme of trucks, trains, and technology. Turns out that some gigantic percentage of national rail traffic runs through the city of Harvey. And they also sit at the nexus of all these highway systems. And so the thing they were lacking was technology. So they integrated their economic development sort of strategy of being a transport hub in Chicago and had that be a motivator to include broadband. Next slide. So this is another approach. This was for our Accelerate program. This is Whiteside County. They created their own website where they have the survey both in English and in Spanish. They had, you can see their logo up there. That's the outline of Whiteside County. And their tagline of robust, affordable broadband internet for everyone in Whiteside County. Every word in that tagline is important. And it's a nice, memorable, short, pithy elevator pitch. Their fuller vision statement is on the other side of the slide. Connect Whiteside envisions an equitable deployment and use of robust, affordable broadband infrastructure that improves the quality of life and competitiveness of every resident, business, and organization in Whiteside County. And so this was a list of places on their webpage where you could actually take a paper survey in addition to this online effort. So a nice bunch of tactics there. And then there are a couple of other examples I wanted to give you. You'll get this again in the slides and email that Nancy sends you later, but just to take it out of state, I worked with the Texas rural funders. 80% of Texas is rural. And there was no state broadband office, there was no state broadband plan, and this is a group of funders who played an essential role in kickstarting state broadband efforts. And they started with something that was very cute called Get Connected, Y'all, a guidebook for Texas communities on securing broadband. And the chapter 2 really talks about how they created a vision. And what they did again was tell stories of rural communities and highlighted best practices and learned lessons. This was part of a report that Benton did about how philanthropy should get more involved in this effort. We would suggest to you all that if there is local philanthropy, community, foundations, a business that has a philanthropic arm. We worked in a county, and I'm sorry, I think it was Brown County, where a food wholesale business had a big foundation. The largest food wholesale business in the country was stationed. I think it was Brown. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. And their foundation was very instrumental in helping broadband. And the reason was that when they went to send people home to work remotely during the pandemic, 40% of people could not work from home. So they said, it's enough already. We're going to try to get broadband in our community, because otherwise, how can our employees stay safe during the pandemic? The city of Long Beach, a very mixed community in Southern California, had a wonderful vision statement in their digital inclusion roadmap. And I think that's also worth taking a look at. Okay, next slide. And now I get to turn it over to Deanna, who's going to take herself off mute and talk about some local strategies that you all can implement. Thank you, Deanna, for being here.
Thanks, Adrianne, and thanks for reminding me to take myself off mute. I have a 5-year-old and a 6-year-old at home, and we've brought home more germs from school this winter than anything else. And so I've been pulling double duty between ISA and at home. Both girls are home with strep throat with their dad today. So It's fine. So just a little bit about me. I actually am in a internet desert at home. So I'm actually in the Illinois Soybean Association office in Bloomington today, but I live directly west of here in Manitou. My husband farms full time, and up until we got Starlink about 6 months ago, and I actually got creative with that. We had horrible internet access. And so I'm really excited to work with you guys on this project. We live right on the Mason and Tazewell County line, so we're kind of unique in that regard. And so anyway, I just, wanted to let you know that I understand where you're coming from when it comes to rural broadband, because I live it every day. And so I'm excited to get this project up off the ground. A little bit about my role here at Illinois Soybean. So I'm anything and everything media. So I work with our agronomy team, our government relations team, and then our market development team. And anything that they need communicated to the media, or if we have stories to pitch, I'm that liaison. I went to the University of Illinois. I'm an ag comm graduate from many, many moons ago. We won't talk about that. But one of my mentors, and someone I'm still very much in contact with, is Dr. Jim Evans, and we kind of call him the godfather of AgCom. He's a wonderful man, and one of the quotes that has always been with me ever since he said it to me is, to communicate is the beginning of understanding. And that's really, when you think about what we're doing here, at the foundation of it, you're all being communicators through this initiative. You're communicating the importance of your the goals that your team has set. You're communicating the importance of finding that internet provider and sharing with them why you need them to come to your area. And then we think about all of the benefits that rural broadband is going to bring. And a lot of it's communications based, from revitalizing rural communities and creating jobs to, educational opportunities, telehealth, all of those things. So I thought that maybe an inspiring quote this morning might get you started. You can advance, Grace, if you want. Okay, so working with the local media. So I have access to software that I utilize here on a daily basis. And with that software, I can generate a media list for you for your area. So instead of you trying to find, every newspaper, radio station, TV station, I can help you with that. Send me an email and, let me know what county you're from, and I can work on that. And, I have written a series of press releases ever since we started. And I'm more than happy to share those with you in Word documents. You can take them and tailor them to your specific area. And you can, even if you want to, you can take out Todd's quotes and put the team leader quotes in. It's okay. We've been developing materials and I've been telling your story as we've been going along here, but there's nothing wrong with you also doing this at the ground level. So I don't know if you have already, but picking someone to oversee all the public relations efforts helps, just so that person can be the keeper of the list and deciding what to do when. And then working with that media list, I'm more than happy to generate that report for you and send it to you. And then, just start by introducing yourselves, right? So communicating, informing, and educating, especially now as, your surveys are out or getting ready to go out, you really want to create that awareness. And then just because I deploy so many press releases here on a weekly basis, I write ours for this initiative bi-weekly. So I give folks an update on what's going on. And then, the other part of this too is, if you're a strong writer, there's nothing wrong with writing a letter to the editor or an op-ed piece, giving an update on the project. And, Adrianne, we could probably put some resources together for folks if they need, some a prompt or some direction when writing those. I'll make sure we work on that and we can get that to Nancy.
That'd be great. Thank you, Deanna.
Sorry, as I'm reading through this, I'm also thinking of things, you guys. And then working with your local radio and TV stations to do featured interviews on broadband, getting in and making that contact and that relationship, I think is super important. And if you can do bi-weekly updates with them or a monthly segment, it's public information, you're non-for-profit, you're not selling anything, and it's benefiting ultimately them. So, I think that they would be more than happy to work with you. Please let me know if there's anything I can do to help you with that. I can send you, I have some rural broadband talking points. So anytime Todd does an interview for broadband or one of our farmer directors, I draft talking points. So they have them ahead of time and they can read through them. It's just very quick. And then if they get in the interview and, they blank or, something happens, they can quickly reference those. So always being prepared is key. And I have a lot of this already developed. So all you have to do is ask. And then your press releases or your letters to the editor, or even your survey, maybe work with schools and see if you can send that out through their school newsletter or put it on their website. I don't know if you have American Legions or the VFW. I grew up in a small town of Delavan, and every Sunday at the Legion in town was breakfast. And you either went before church or after church, and the whole town was there. So if you can get into some public meetings like that, that really aren't, those are good things to get into as well. Extension is great about sending out newsletters at the county level, and so is Farm Bureau. And I know Baily will talk a little bit more about that, but in Extension and in Farm Bureau, there's different committees. So Baily has her exec committee, which is, I would say, your senior farmer leaders. She has a young ag leader committee. She probably even touches collegiate Farm Bureau at U of I don't know, I'm not sure. I'm kind of speaking out of turn there. But then like in Mason County, we have a women's group. We have a senior, I don't want to say senior citizens group, but we have a retired farmers group that gets together. And so, there's different people at different levels that you can touch, and all you have to do is find that point person. So those are just some of my suggestions. Anything you want to add there, Adrianne? Did I miss anything?
No, you didn't, but you have a whole nother wonderful slide. So.
Oh, yes. Okay. Gracie, you can go to, yes, there we go. Okay. So working with your county agriculture industry. So I want you to think about the pillars of ag in your community. Is it the equipment dealer? Is it the county farm bureau office? Is it your local grain elevator? Is it a meat processing facility? Is it a livestock facility like mash hops or something like that? Or is it a fertilizer plant? When I think about where we are at, where my husband and I are at, one of the things that comes to mind is Precision Planting and then Tremont Co-op. They're both in Tazewell County, but they also serve Mason County. And like I said, I'm kind of on a weird line there. And working to get those folks involved is something that I would do boots on the ground there. I would say find 4 to 6 pillars that cover your county, north, south, east, west. That kind of gives you a good blanket coverage. And then go out and introduce yourselves and let them know what you're doing and why it's important. And then while you're out, introduce yourself to the county farm bureau manager and the local extension office and ask to be involved. I'm sure once you tell them what you're doing and who you're working with and why, they're going to jump right in and want to roll up their sleeves and get to work with you.
Deanna, I was just going to say that Nancy can provide list of local extension agents. I know Mike Delaney is on the phone today because Nancy is also at a conference, but that is a resource for you to find out who you might contact where you live. Go ahead. Sorry,
Yes.
Deanna.
Oh, no, you're okay. That's great. And, we have so many so many folks at the ground level that want to do the same thing that we're doing, which is revitalizing those rural communities and changing lives, ultimately. I've said this to Adrianne a lot as we started working on this project. What we're doing is so comparable and relatable to the Rural Electrification Act in 1950. My father-in-law just turned 70 last year, and he remembers when electricity came to their farm. I live in the original family farmhouse, and we have, brought that electricity and the electrical wiring up to code. But my bedroom, that's our office and toy room, more toy room these days downstairs, is a little bit smaller because someone in our previous generations patched in the bathroom when indoor plumbing was invented. And so while we're sitting here in 2023, I really want you to think about that. I want you to think about the fact that really our generation and the generations before us have seen so much change, and we're taking it a step further with this initiative. And ultimately, it all goes back to Dr. Evans' quote, to communicate is the beginning of understanding. And I think that ties into when you're working with farmers, when you're working with everybody, to set up those points of contact, but then also taking it a step further when you start talking infrastructure, you're just helping make that connection and communicate.
Thank you so much, Deanna. And, I wanted to let everybody know that Mike Delaney has put in the chat a link to extension staff so that you all can take a look at that. Grace, before we do this slide, excuse me, I'm going to now turn it over to Baily Conrady. And actually, Deanna, I'd love to have you introduce Baily. I know the two of you are close, and then let's let her take our remaining, say, 10 to 12 minutes to talk about what she's doing in Champaign County before I come back to my final slide and send you all into your breakout rooms. So go ahead, Deanna.
Okay, well, so Baily, I know Baily, but Baily might not know me because I'm much older than her, but we have a lot of mutual friends and colleagues, and so I'll let her introduce herself. But Baily, it's so great to see you in person. We've met several times, but we're so thankful that you're here. We love the work that you're doing. So thanks for being with us today.
Thank you all for having me. I'm going to go ahead and hopefully share my screen, maybe, if everyone can see that. We good?
Yep, you're good.
Perfect. So my name is Baily Conrady. I am now the manager at the Champaign County Farm Bureau. 23 days ago, I was the assistant manager at the Champaign County Farm Bureau. So it's been a big time of transition right now for me, but I'm excited to be here to talk about, again, Connect Champaign County, as Adrianne was talking about that wording, which is an initiative that we have been working on for several years, and which has certainly kind of hit hyperspeed as all of this federal money has started flowing. So to get started, we actually started working on broadband infrastructure in rural parts of Champaign County in 2019. We had members that were concerned about the fact that areas very much adjacent to Champaign-Urbana itself were receiving funding to improve broadband, and the more rural areas of the county were not. So they brought those concerns to our board of directors, and our board basically told my former boss, Brad, and myself to go and figure this out, which was very kind of a very vague mission statement for something that's very large. So we actually started by doing a broadband survey before broadband surveys were cool, and got some great responses from our voting members that reside outside of Champaign-Urbana. So it's basically a Champaign, if you take Champaign-Urbana out, basically looks like a donut. So it's all the areas outside of kind of the Champaign-Urbana urban area. We ended up with somewhere between 600 and 700 responses on that survey. out of the approximately 1,500 we sent out. So that was a pretty good response rate for us. We pushed it really hard for about 3 months and we're able to map areas, and we really were kind of taking steps to reach out to providers, and then COVID hit. And COVID both shut things down and also very much made plain the gap between the rural areas of the county and Champaign-Urbana with regards to high-speed, reliable internet. I live on the family farm, much like Deanna, that is very, very internet desolate. The school district we live in is a very tiny rural school district, 75 kids K through 8. 75% of those kids didn't have access to a high-speed internet connection outside of their parents' phone when COVID hit. So their remote learning was the bus drivers driving their bus routes every day and dropping off handouts and pamphlets for the students to do. So that, it just brought to mind just the great differences. So we continued to work on this through COVID. And then when the American Rescue Plan came out and we saw that it involved broadband infrastructure and that you could invest that money into broadband, we got in and got in fast. We were the first group to get in front of our county board to ask for money for a specific project. So we were at their first board meeting when they were discussing ARPA funds, and we made an ask for $15 million out of the $40.2 million that they had been given from the federal government. Of course, they didn't just say, yeah, here's your $15 million. We did really have to work it. One of the things that was incredibly successful for us was we got our members to submit public comment to the county board with their stories about how rural broadband could help them. We got between, I want to say we were right at 45 members who submitted public comment. And in that first meeting, multiple county board members talked about how those testimonies made a difference in their mind and really made them understand the issues that were faced in the rural parts of the county. And that was a really impactful effort that really kind of got this whole thing started. So the county, after several meetings, made an initial $3 million investment in what they were calling at the time the County Broadband Initiative. So that money was at least some of it was used to generate a county broadband report. Finley Engineering put that one together, which of course involved another survey, which we helped push out to our members again. We promoted very heavily. When the results of that survey came back, the county had formed the Champaign County Broadband Task Force, which my former boss, Brad, he was actually the chair of that task force. And they issued a final report recommendation and recommended that an additional $7 million for a total of $10 million be committed from the ARPA funds for investment in rural broadband infrastructure. The county board has voted to approve that additional $7 million. So while we went in asking for 15, we ended up getting 10, which is basically a quarter of the ARPA money. So we're viewing that as a pretty big success. So that has now led into what we're calling the Connect Champaign County Initiative. So this initiative is being spearheaded by the Champaign County Farm Bureau out of this office. We have already recruited and trained about 7 volunteers who have gone and are preparing to go out and do public presentations and meetings. We are getting letters of support for upcoming grant application periods from those community pillars. And we're not just working in ag. We're going out to Carl Foundation Hospital. So, because telehealth is a big issue in rural areas. And I'm sorry, I'm fidgety. We're going out to our school districts, our drainage districts, anyone we can think of that would be considered a community pillar that a letter of support will matter from. We also are handling a social media outreach. We're going to do a monthly newsletter. And we do have the bones of a website up. It is connectchampaigncounty.com. It's not fully built out yet with everything I want on there, but it's a start. So we're going to do outreach and everything else. And the big portion that we're really working hard on, and that is the big lift, is easements. So as part of the broadband task force, they chose 2 preferred providers for the county to work for. They had somewhere between 5 and 8 apply, and they ended up choosing NextLink, which is a national company based out of Texas, and then Volo, which is actually a company based here in Urbana. So a variation there. And those 2 companies have come up with a memorandum of understanding to divide the county between the 2 of them to basically be able to build out the broadband infrastructure in the rural parts of the county. NextLink had already received some grant money for certain census blocks in Champaign. And so they're tying that together with this. So we're working with those 2 providers to basically come up with a way to streamline the easement process while maintaining landowner rights. So within the County Farm Bureau system, and if you go talk to your county farm bureaus, you'll realize quickly that maintaining landowner rights is one of those pillars we stand on. We want broadband internet, but we don't want it at the risk of hurting our landowners. And so making sure there is a very clear easement process is important. In the state of Illinois, most township and county roads, the landowners own to the middle of the road. So they can't go out and just put it in the road ditch and say, oh, I've got the road commissioner's permission. That's not enough. They need to have landowner permission. And there have been numerous examples of fly-by-night contractors who go in, don't ask permission, cut drainage tile especially, and you can never find them to help them get it fixed. So we're working to make sure that the easement that's put in front of these landowners is fair to both sides. We know that we can't get everything the landowners would probably want and not everything the companies can want. And we're putting our reputation on the line as the Farm Bureau to help our landowners and help these companies be able to bring broadband to the rural parts of the county. And that's a little bit scary as you're sitting in my seat to say that, but it's true. We want it to be fair for everyone, and we want broadband in the rural parts of the county. So we are putting ourselves in the easement process to help that happen. The conservative number of easements that we're going to have to get this done in Champaign is close to 3,000. We are also working with county government to reduce the cost of filing those easements so that the companies aren't overwhelmed with nickel and dime $60 to $65 charges every time they have to file an easement. But that really is our heavy lift. And that's part of what we're going out and doing these public meetings for. It's because we want landowners to know about this project before an easement gets slid across the desk. We're in a unique position where we are ahead of this project. You know, the installers aren't a mile down the road saying they're going to be there tomorrow. We're going to know where they're going. We're going to know what the engineering looks like, and we're going to be able to help our landowners understand how this process is going to work, when it's going to happen, and be able to get out in front of it and be very proactive with it instead of reactive. So in the end, our goal is fast, reliable, affordable broadband internet to every household in Champaign County. And so it's a big goal. It's a huge project. There are certainly people out there who don't think we can do it, but we're going to do it. And so that's where Connect Champaign County is at right now. We're in a bit of a holding pattern right at this moment as we're waiting on some of the engineering to get done so we know where they want to start, so we can make a very targeted approach to civic groups, landowners, companies in the areas where they're going to start first. We don't want to go in and talk to some folks and then they'll not see any infrastructure go until 2025. We want to be more targeted than that. So currently in a bit of a holding pattern, but it's aggressive, it's ambitious, and it's a project, as we've talked about, it's very much a legacy project for everyone involved with Connect Champaign County. So with that, if anyone has any questions, you can type them in the chat. I know that Deanna and Adrianne probably have my contact information. If anyone has any questions, I do see Hancock County. Do you have an easement template that could be shared? We are currently working on that. I actually have a meeting next week with a couple of local attorneys who do a lot of easement work for a bevy of landowners in the county to go over what we have as a proposed easement. So when we get that get that finalized, I'll probably be able to share it. What percentage of the county was covered by the 10 million? So the 10 million is very much meant to be kind of some, I guess, startup funds that we're hoping can be matched by more grant money coming, whether that's Connect Illinois rounds 3 and 4, whether that's more infrastructure dollars that are coming down the pipe from the federal government. I would say that of the county, we could, if we just had the 10 million, we could probably cover about 1/5 of the county or so.
So thank you so much, Baily. I would like to ask a question, which was, we know Finley Engineering, we think they're a wonderful firm, and I'd like to understand what they did in preparation for maybe your conversations with the 5 to 8 ISPs, because I'm assuming that you had already had some discussions with the ISPs, but then you got some information from Finley that helped you kind of move that along. Maybe you could describe that, describe what they gave you and what that cost. That would be interesting to me.
So the county, the Champaign County government engaged Finley Engineering to do their kind of their broadband, the state of broadband infrastructure and what they thought it would take to cover rural Champaign County in it. So they did, I think that report ended up being like 730 pages long. I'm on page about 15. We'll see if I get through the rest of them. And Finley really was the consultant for the broadband task force, is basically what their goal was. And so they were instrumental in making sure the broadband task force was educated in what they needed to ask these providers. They did some background work on the providers, kind of provided just some background information, but it really was the broadband task force that chose Nextlink and Volo. If I'm remembering, I don't remember the number off the top of my head of what that all cost. I could look it up and certainly find it. I will tell you that Finley is probably going to be re-engaged by the county to come in and be a bit of a project manager to kind of wrangle all the goats when it comes to when infrastructure starts getting in the ground, because the county would like to see a little more oversight, and no one at the county really has the expertise to be that oversight for this process. So they're going to probably re-engage Finley to kind of be that oversight mechanism for the county. I see Ron Kern asking a question. Baily, would Bilbo Dine be a resource to write a model easement agreement and run it through review with OGC? Ron, we've worked with Bill extensively on this project. We have actually been working though with Laura Harmon out of OGC on this. And actually one of our local attorneys has written our model easement agreement. We were able to secure the model easement agreements from both companies. And then one of our local attorneys who does a lot of easement work, whether that's for drainage districts or for farmers, and who is very well thought of in the county, actually has written that model easement agreement that we're now working to get everyone to okay. So Laura Harmon has had that. She's been reading through it and looking through it. And it's just kind of a very collaborative effort.
You know, Baily, I so appreciate you being here. It's such a great follow-on to the presentation we heard from Bill Bodine with some very, I think, good pictures about the problems of what I would call sloppy broadband implementation. Wires that go too low that tractors can't get under, as you point out, tile breakage. And so I think your balance between what works for the landowner and what works for the broadband provider is a delicate balance, and one that you all are very equipped to be helpful on. I want to just highlight for people that as we go into our breakout rooms, this is a new element for our programs to bring in this easement process, and the Farm Bureau is really the right place for you to be working through these issues in outreach to landowners to get the permissions that you need because of the middle of the road rights of way on mostly township roads. And I think that what Baily has shown is A, it takes a while, B, that there is money available, C, that communications is incredibly important to train those 7 volunteers, to get them out doing community meetings, to have the website up, to do the newsletter, all the tools that Deanna talked about. I hate to put this on your plate, guys, but in order to be successful, this is the kind of, and why we ask you to build your teams and keep adding members as you go forward, is this is what it takes. This is not a, you're going to be done with this and money is going to be there and somebody's going to build the perfect network for you. We always say, and maybe Grace, you can bring up, Baily, if you would stop sharing your screen, Grace is going to put up the last slide in my presentation. And if you could add, if you don't mind, Baily, getting your email into the chat, if people have questions. I know sometimes that can be overwhelming, but I know the teams will respect your own time, but we would love that. But I do want to say that, you know, it takes a village. We overuse that phrase a lot, but I think the example of what Baily's talked to, trying to find the right experts, getting your county board on, working with your landowners. This is, you know, it's a team sport, so to speak. And the communications, I love that quote of Deanna's mentor, that communications is the beginning of understanding. So I super appreciate that everybody is here today. We have a good turnout today. Of our teams, and we're going to put you in your rooms soon, but there is a resource which you only see a part of it on the slide right now, where you can work through kind of a worksheet, if you'd like, in your team breakout, to start to begin to talk about this communication strategy. Maybe Shubika, you can put that in the chat, the link to this worksheet, so that if people want to download that. But I would remind people that you can talk about your survey. And I love that Baily said, well, they had to do 2 of them because sometimes things change between the first one and the second one, but let's try to get as many responses. You all received an email from Nancy giving you your survey results to date. And we're low, guys, so we're going to keep doing that outreach to try to get information. Deanna is going to actually be sending out the survey to her farmers. And I think that Deanna is a late March, April effort. Baily, yes. You have your hand up?
I will say that, especially on both of our surveys, the thing that really got us a ton of responses was texting the link to our members.
Oh.
When we texted it, people responded like it was wildfire. Because no one leaves a text unread. Let's all be honest with ourselves. No one's going to leave a text unread. And so that got us a ton of responses.
Oh, that is so great to know that. Thank you. Sorry, guys. Thank you, Baily. That's an important piece of information. And I agree. My kids, who are much older than the 2 of you with your kids, are always saying, Mom, you never read your text. So I may be one of the few people that don't do it and still rely on email, but I would agree. It's definitely a younger, people are more focused on their phones and tend to carry it with them. So of course that means it's a more timely response. Anyway, when you get into your room, talk about survey. You can continue to work on your vision statement, but I would also encourage you to look through this communicating your vision worksheet and trying to make an attempt to do some of the tasks there. So unless we have further questions, I want to thank Baily and Deanna for adding to my presentation. I hope you all found this useful. Again, I know it's a lot of data. We all stand ready to help you. I think Deanna's offer to put together media lists for each county is just an incredible resource. Again, a new resource for this program, and I really appreciate Illinois Soy's partnership in Broadband Breakthrough. So let's get the Shubika, there's the worksheet link in the chat. And if you could put the breakout rooms, and I want to thank Shubika and Mike for, let's see, I am not getting the, let's see. You know, I'm getting a survey, Shubika.
Let me just
Yeah,
make
that
sure.
gets me into the University of Illinois system and makes me fill out something that I know I can't to get to the link.
Okay, let me just recheck.
That'd be great. And everybody can start to choose your breakout room. Again, those of you who are not specific to a county can go visit any breakout room you want. I know we have Jonathan and John from ISU on, Deanna and anybody else who isn't assigned can join their breakout. And we're still looking for the worksheet. I'm sorry. You know, I know Robbie shared it with me.
I did put it in the chat again, Adrianne. Do you want to check the link?
Let's try this one. Yes, indeedy. Thank you so much, Shubika. It'll be the second updated worksheet link. And Bill and Robbie and the rest of the team will be back. I really want to thank you all for allowing me to co-opt this session. And again, please let us know if you have any questions. Thanks so much. Get into your break.